Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melisa Liberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Today, we're talking about the situation that so many independent consultants face from time to time, which is your consulting revenue is down. Are you in that position right now where your revenue is down and you're not sure what to do about it? And it's starting to seep in, and that thought of, should I go back to corporate, is coming at you louder and louder. Or maybe you know that this is part of the cycle of running a business and you want to plan ahead for this situation when your revenue goes down. Sometimes it does. It's not a problem, and it doesn't have to be a problem. And today I'm sharing with you the 90-day turnaround plan to help you get back on track with your consulting revenue, whether you're down right now and you want to get back on track immediately, or whether you're not there at this point, but you want to have a tool in place so that you can handle it proactively when it does happen. It happens to all of us. It's not a problem, but we want to have a plan to address it so it doesn't become a huge problem. So that's what we're here for today. Welcome to episode 200 of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. This is Melisa Liberman, and we're going to dive into this topic. Before we do, I thought I would share a quick personal update. So as of the day of recording, it is the middle of July, and I am in the middle of what they call championship season for swimming for my kids, long course. So my oldest has his Colorado State meet this weekend, and the younger two, their meet is next weekend. The middle one, it's his last 12 and under, so I'm excited to watch all of them swim. And then we're going to Dallas for Junior Olympics for water polo at the end of the month. And my husband is taking my oldest to a Western regional meet in California at the same time. So lots of culmination of really hard work over the summer. They've been working really hard on training, and I've been working really hard on different programs and concepts and client support while I'm at these various pools. So anyway, that's the update. Oh, and also on a personal note, I think I shared this last year, but my family's cattle ranch, which is in Western Colorado, was really threatened by one of the largest wildfires in state history last summer. I think it grew to 200,000 acres or something like that. And so we're kind of thinking maybe this summer would be a reprieve because that fire had come so close. It seemed like there's nothing left to burn. But sadly, they've got another one that's really close to their ranch again this summer. It's so dry here in Colorado and lots of parts of the Western U.S. So if you're facing something similar or have family facing something similar, my heart goes out to you because it's really stressful. So anyway, that is what's happening here at Melisa Liberman Coaching and Extended Family. And let's now talk about the topic for today, which is managing a downturn. And this is coming up because I've been getting this question from consultants. Sometimes it's because it's the summer months and we get this question, every summer it feels like a downturn, but it's really just part of the cycle where it feels harder to sell work in the summer, but it's part of the cycle. And then other times it's just overall the year sometimes years feel really lucrative and easier than other years, right? And so if you're experiencing this, I want to say to you, you're definitely not alone. There are a lot of consultants out there right now that are facing a downturn, that are in the middle of a downturn, that are managing a downturn. If you're in that spot, again, that's what we're here for today, to help you get out of it. And you can get out of it. That is good news. And I want to share with you how to do that. If you're not in the downturn, now this is the best time to plan for one when you're not in that emotional side of it. So in either case, you're in the right spot. Let's talk about the agenda. So first I'll share with you the companion resource that goes with today's episode. Then we'll just define what is a downturn so we know exactly what it is we're talking about in this context. And then we'll talk about the downturn plan. So there's several components to it. I'll walk you through the whole plan of addressing your turnaround and a 90-day plan to get out of it. It doesn't mean that you have to wait for revenue for 90 days, but I'll tell you exactly what that plan is, and then we'll wrap up the episode with the specific steps to put it into action. All right. The companion resource. I recommend that you go download my book. If you have not yet done so, go download it. If you already have, I would go do it again unless you know exactly where it's located, or even go buy it on Amazon. I always love having the printed copy. As an aside, if you bought one on Amazon and you haven't yet put in a review, I would greatly appreciate it. It will help bubble it up back up again for other consultants to find. But go download it at consultingbusinessbook.com or melisa.com. My name is spelled with one of each letter, Melisa, melisabook.com. You can go download the book, but what I want to strongly suggest to you is the companion toolkit that goes with it. So it's a 14-step process to make your independent consulting goals a reality. And within those 14 steps, some are do once and never do again. Some are do occasionally, maybe every few years. Some are more repetitive. So it's not 14 steps forever. But that toolkit will help you go through and guide you through putting those 14 steps into action. And I find that, especially when you're in a downturn type of a situation, going back to the fundamentals are incredibly important. So that's why I'm recommending this to you. And go download that as a additional resource to today's episode. Okay, my friend, let's talk about what is a downturn. So the way that I want to define it for this podcast episode is in a very simple way. If your booked revenue, so that means the contracts that you've closed that are signed, if that booked revenue, not necessarily your cash, because sometimes we put in our contracts very even payments. Sometimes we put in lump sum type payments. So we're talking about booked revenue. If your booked revenue has been below your plan for over 90 days and your current pipeline cannot close that gap in time, then you're in a downturn. If you've got one of those scenarios and not the other, then you've got issues to solve, but it's not necessarily a downturn. Today, we're talking about the downturn in the sense of your booked revenue has been below your plan for over 90 days, and your current pipeline, that weighted pipeline, cannot close the gap in time to make up for it. So when we think about that, that's what we're talking about here today as a downturn. And you want to be really clear about this because I find so often, we've talked about this on the last couple of episodes even, that we just go off of feeling, right? Oh, that I feel like I'm behind, or it feels like I'm behind, or it feels like my pipeline isn't where it needs to be. None of those are helpful. Because most of the time, I find that consultants underestimate what's really going on. Sometimes we overestimate it. Usually it's not accurate. So you want to go look at the numbers in your QuickBooks, in your Xero, whatever it is that you're using. Go look at the actual numbers. What is my booked revenue? What is my accounts payable? What is my weighted contract value? Weighted pipeline value? And then get the real numbers, so that you know for sure, am I in a downturn or not? Because at the end of the day, this is not about how you feel. A downturn is not how you feel. I feel like things are going down. I feel like things are not as easy as they used to be. I feel like things are not positive for the second half of the year. Whatever it is that you might be saying, that is not actually a downturn. That's just a feeling. So, not that there's anything wrong with feelings. We've talked about that here too. But we want them to be accurate. And anxiety is not an accurate indicator in this case. So, number one, be really clear for yourself. Am I in a downturn right now? And if I am, then we'll implement this plan I'm about to share with you. So if you are in a downturn right now after having done that math, then we're going to walk through the plan. And if you aren't in a downturn, again, that's great. Great news. Let's make the plan right now so that when you hit a downturn, you know exactly what to do and you can shorten that cycle. Okay, so now let's talk about the 90-day plan to get you out of the downturn and back into a rising up trajectory, a trajectory that is going upward. So the first component of this 90-day plan is your mindset. And if you've listened to this podcast at any length of time, you won't be surprised by this, but I purposefully put this at the beginning of your plan because it is not a nice to have. It is not fluffy. It is not something that if you have time, you can handle it. Or if it happens, that's great. This is first and foremost step one. And I'll tell you what this means. You've got to address your downturn mindset. And it really comes down to 3 buckets. The first is conviction. So let me take a step back though, because when we think about the way we would be thinking, you might be thinking this way right now if you're in a downturn. Oh, it's the economy is not that great right now. Everything is shifting to AI. There's so much uncertainty in the world. It makes it really difficult. Client budgets have been cut. Of course, it would make sense there's a downturn. It feels so frustrating. I'm in this downturn. I'm scared that I'm not going to be able to replace my corporate income and even move beyond that. I don't think this feels sustainable. This is really hard, right? Those are all the ways of thinking that are your existing mindset or a snippet of the existing mindset when you're in a downturn. And it can be very crippling, right? When you're constantly feeling like you're failing, when you constantly are feeling like this might not be a successful type of business for you, when you're questioning yourself and your ability to succeed, of course, it is going to be almost debilitating. That's why if you go forward with that mindset, with that way of looking at things, that it's going to be really hard to get out of your downturn because your brain is so fixated on all the things that could go wrong, are going wrong. And it's really hard to be effective with the types of things that you need to be doing to get out of this downturn, talking with people, understanding their challenges, proposing engagements and solutions to solve their challenges. When you're coming at that from a feeling of disappointment and fear and all of those things that would naturally come with a downturn, it's going to be incredibly difficult to get yourself out of it. And the trick is most of us think, well, to get out of a downturn mindset, I need to land a client and then I'll feel better. But it's actually the opposite. You've got to get your headspace into one of conviction, of clarity, of success, of abundance in order to then land the project and get yourself out of the downturn. I can assure you, after having done this myself for 14 years and counting, and having worked with so many consultants, that this step, if you do nothing else, is vital, is non-negotiable. So this downturn mindset, we need to turn around the mindset, which has these 3 components I want to share with you. The first is conviction, knowing without a doubt that you will succeed. You might not be sure how, but knowing you will. And I know for me, when I was first starting out and I really wanted to move away from being dependent on my network and my former colleagues and clients from corporate, there were so many unknowns. And then, the project would end or it would end early. And then I would feel like I was starting back from ground zero. There were so many times that I didn't know if I would succeed, but I worked on this. I would tell myself, I don't know if I know I'm going to succeed in landing a project with XYZ company or by Monday or by, next month, but I know for sure I will succeed at this. There is no other option. And this is a mindset that you cultivate. It's not just something that happens to you or that you have. So many of us think that, well, I just, I'm feeling shaky right now, as if it's just how it is, versus no, this is a state of mind that you're experiencing because of the way you're thinking, and you get to change it. You get to shift it. You get to decide what you're going to think and what you're not going to think. And the more you question or allow your brain to go off into that spiral of, I don't know if this is going to work, what's going to happen, what about this, what about that, what about all of those things, end up diluting your ability to be successful in getting yourself out of this downturn. And instead, you've got to cultivate this conviction. And you might say, well, it doesn't, it's fiction. I don't have any projects right now. I don't know if I'm going to succeed. Let's just be honest. Almost everything is fiction. It's all made up. You get to decide if you think you're going to be successful. Think about it. If you think about when you were in corporate and, had a lot of conviction, like I'm going to be successful, I'll eventually get that promotion, or I'm going to be here until I decide I want to leave. And you felt very sure about that. You felt very clear about that. That was not based on reality. They could have fired you or let you go or replaced you or demoted you at any moment. But you created that in your mind that you felt really clear and convicted that I will be successful here. And that's all I'm saying to you now is you want to do the same thing. Even if you don't have as much evidence that you would like, you've got to decide at the macro level, I know without a doubt 100% I will succeed at this. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I know for sure I will be successful. That is the first part of this turnaround mindset. The second part of your turnaround mindset is commitment. I have decided, and we'll talk about what the plan looks like here in a minute, but committing to the plan. I'm deciding that no matter what, this is the plan, and I'm not going to deviate from it for 90 days. And when my brain starts trying to talk me out of it, because it always will, I am committed. And you might have to remind yourself of this commitment multiple times a day. Because when we're in a downturn, this is where the height of fear occurs. This is where the self-doubt starts flourishing. This is where we could spend so much of our time focusing on all of those what ifs, and we're losing all of that ability to solve the problem when we're focused so much on that. So that's why it could take so many redirections during the course of the day. But the mindset is critical, the turnaround mindset. The other component to this turnaround mindset that I think is equally important is all about speed. Oftentimes we say to ourselves, well, my pipeline was dry. It's going to take me a long time to get it back up and running and to uncover clients. It takes clients a long time to make decisions. Like we say all of these things to ourselves. And of course, there are plenty of examples where that is true, but there are also examples where it doesn't have to be true. And so reminding yourself for a turnaround mindset that you could land a client at any moment, that you could land a client at any given day or week. You've certainly been someone who's had relationships and has relationships with people who would buy your consulting services or introduce you to people who would buy those consulting services. You've done work that may pay off immediately. And also you can be doing more work, different approaches that we'll talk about here in a minute that can also lead to work that can be quick hits. And so we want to be watching for you thinking this will take a long time. To recover from a downturn, it can take a really long time. We want the opposite of that. This can be a quick turnaround. Now, of course, I told you this is a 90-day plan, but I also told you it doesn't have to take 90 days. That you can figure out how to shorten that down to weeks. And that's what we're talking about here. So working on your mindset, noticing where you're telling yourself and reinforcing self-doubt versus feeling convicted and knowing for sure, without a doubt, you'll be successful. Reminding yourself of the commitment that you're making to yourself over the plan we're about to cover. That when you start tempting yourself with changing directions, you remind yourself, I'm going all the way through this to the end. I know I can make this work. And reminding yourself it could work at any moment, that it doesn't take forever. It doesn't have to take forever to recover from a downturn. We do not want this downturn to be a circumstance for you. This is in so many ways a way of thinking, your mindset that can help accelerate you getting out of this downturn and back into the trajectory that you're looking for, where you set your goals this year. All right. The other thing I want to say about mindset, and then we'll start talking about some of the tactics, is that you want to stop justifying. I hinted at this a little bit ago, but what this sounds like is the market is soft. My buyers have no budget this year. It's summer. No one's deciding anything. AI is taking over. All of those types of things. And there's thousands of other examples when it feels like it's just an explanation or a justification. You are causing a longer downturn, a bigger downturn, a longer and bigger downturn. You don't want this. It might make you feel better for a few moments, but this is not the answer. Finding reasons or justifications or ways to blame why you're in a downturn is not useful and, in fact, is incredibly harmful. You want to, whenever you notice yourself saying these things, and sometimes they're hard to catch, whenever you notice yourself saying these things usually it's to yourself, the internal dialogue, you want to catch that and stop it immediately. We don't speak that way. It's like me in the car. My kids are like fighting in the car this morning and start yelling at each other. And one tells one to shut up. I'm like, no, we do not say that. Like, you've crossed a line. And so for you, you have crossed a line. When you notice yourself justifying or explaining away why you're in this downturn, you say to yourself, we don't do that. That is a line we just do not cross, because there's zero upside to you for figuring out reasons, quote unquote, that this has happened. Because at the end of the day, I could give you 1,000 examples that are the exact opposite, where buyers are buying. Buyers are buying more consulting than ever. Buyers are buying in the summer. Buyers are paying more than they ever have. There are so many examples that are opposite of what you're telling yourself. And the only benefit of you telling yourself is immediate, just a relief, right? Relief that is fleeting. And that is not helpful. So stop justifying this downturn and install the mindset that we talked about. That is the first part of this plan. The next part of this plan is the guiding question I'll share with you, which is, how do I make this work? So we'll talk about the plan here in a moment, but I want to set the stage here for you, which is the question you want to constantly be asking yourself is, how do I make this work? Not will this work? Will this work keeps you in a mode of evaluating. So you do a little bit of activity and then you don't see immediate traction. And so then you start redeciding again. You switch approaches and you don't even give the first approach the time to be effective, versus how will I make this work? It keeps you executing. It keeps you adjusting. It keeps you going through the plan that you decided on and figuring out how to make it work. It doesn't mean that you have to keep it forever, but committing to the plan, asking yourself, how do I make this work? Versus, will this work? Those are the types of higher quality internal dialogues you want to be having for yourself. That was one more little piece of mindset I wanted to slip in there before we move on to the actual plan. So now that we've got that mindset side of this equation, we've got those three mindsets. We know that we don't want to question whether it will work or not. And we definitely don't want to justify what's going on. We want to start putting in this downturn plan. And ultimately, the goal is, how do you land engagements that have a shorter sales cycle? Because when you're in a downturn, you want to recover from that by landing work in the short term for cash flow, and then setting yourself up for follow-on work or for more of that get your foot in the door type work that will start to recover and build upon and hit your revenue goal. It might be 30,000 a month, 40,000 a month, 50,000 a month, whatever it is. All right. So what I would say is, for the downturn plan, what I highly recommend for you is two things. The first is, look at what is your foot in the door offer. If you don't yet have a foot in the door offer, you want one of those. It's a smaller, lower risk piece of work that your ideal buyer can approve quickly. They have budget that they control to pay for it. They don't need to go getting other people's approval or feedback. They have control over what it is you're offering. It's a diagnostic, an assessment, a strategy, those types of things. a roadmap, define 2-week sprint with a clear output. Like those are the examples of a foot in the door offer. You want to start selling something really small. Now, listen, once you get into conversations with potential clients, if they are wanting you to go, they've got a different type of problem and you can solve that for them, then go down that path. Don't shove this foot in the door offer as the only thing that you can sell, but at least it gives you something to center your work around, center your conversations around, become an expert, a student of your foot in the door offer, figuring out every way that your ideal buyers would care about it. Why would it matter to them? If they knew about this foot in the door offer, that they would be seeking you out to get it? It was so powerful. Those are the types of things that you want to be focused in on so that you can shorten the sales cycle and bring in the cash while also opening up new relationships that ultimately a lot of these lead to follow-on work. So it kills so many birds with one stone, if you will. And the other component that I want to recommend to you for this downturn plan is a quick win plan. Ask yourself the question, and these go hand in hand, of course, but it's looking at the way of landing clients and generating cash and starting to rebuild momentum in a slightly different way. One is from what am I going to offer? And that's the foot in the door. What am I going to offer that would be compelling, that would shorten the sales cycle? And the quick win plan is more about what would a buyer say yes to this month? It's looking at it from the buyer's perspective versus the offer perspective. The offer is what is the problem and what is the solution? And then the quick win plan is about what is my ideal client out there suffering with? What is my ideal client out there faced with? It might be the time of year where they're going into the next budgeting season. It might be that they're behind on their numbers or an earnings call that they're preparing for and didn't do well on the last one. Whatever it is, you want to look at the perspective of the quick win plan and ask yourself, what would my ideal buyer say yes to this month on the budget they already have? It might be slightly different than your foot in the door offer. Who are my ideal clients? Who are my most likely clients? When you look at it from that vantage point, it might encourage you to go back and talk with past clients, even if they were clients that you had worked with when you were in corporate, or your past corporate employers, looking at this from the buyer perspective and figuring out what is your lowest hanging fruit and then going out and tackling that. All right, I want to wrap up the episode with an example, a real life example of a consultant who put this downturn plan into action is partially the inspiration for today's episode. And then stay to the end because we'll talk about the specific steps to go off and do after you listen. Okay, so the example I want to share with you is Anna, who is an independent consultant who does operations consulting, and she does some fractional COO type work. She also does operations type engagements. Therefore, more mature startups, not yet mid-sized companies. And primarily she's hired by the CEO, sometimes by, a CEO who needs support, but often by the CEO. So a little bit of background there. She was working on an engagement and it had been projected to go out, for months. There really was no end date. It was in a fractional capacity, but the project ended early, abruptly. And she didn't have any other work in the pipeline. That was the bulk of her monthly revenue, was this client. And she was shocked, that it ended so abruptly. And so, of course, she started panicking and started worrying. Listen, this is going to take me forever to rebuild my pipeline. I haven't been focused on it. This particular client just kind of fell into her lap, she thought. And so it felt very daunting of how she was going to replace this $30K per month, how she was going to do that quickly so that she didn't get into a downturn, right? Where it was more than 90 days and a huge shift in her revenue. And so we started putting this 90-day plan together for her. So she reached out to me, engaged me, and we started putting this 90-day turnaround plan in place. defined it and put it in place. And before she reached out to me, though, she shared with me that she, had been trying to solve this on her own. And while she was trying to figure it out on her own to land a replacement client, she was secretly looking for full-time roles, starting to wonder, does it make sense right now because I've lost that pillar client? I don't have a great pipeline. Maybe it makes sense to go back to full-time. And she even interviewed for a few of them. She doesn't want to go back to full-time employment, but at the same time, it's what's more familiar, what feels like it's more stable. And so even though she doesn't want to give up all those benefits of being an independent consultant with respect to freedom and flexibility and all the things we love, she did interview for a few full-time roles, but she realized she wanted to make independent consulting work. And so we started working together. We defined her 90-day turnaround plan, which of course started with that mindset side of this. Why are you committed? I gave her a tool that she can use every day to revisit that commitment to getting out of this 90-day or get out of her downturn. It hadn't turned into 90 days yet, but to get out of her potential downturn. Why is she convicted? Why is getting her head in the space of, I know for sure I can make this to be a successful business. Redirecting the panic that she was feeling, noticing when she was making those excuses and calling her out on it, and justifications. So that was a foundation. The mindset side of this. And again, a lot of times we want to race to I need to just start generating revenue. I'll deal with that later. But that's what makes it faster to go land that new revenue, is the mindset side of this. And this doesn't mean that you're journaling for days or weeks. This means that you're spending some purposeful business owner time working on your mindset at the beginning of the day. And when that wears off a little bit, we're not talking about positive thinking here. We're talking about grounded, committed, convicted, confident type mindset, not positive thinking. So for her, it looked like 10 minutes in the morning, another 10 minutes after lunch, maybe a little bit toward the end of the day, to get her head in that space and to redirect when it started going back into the doubt and the panic. And then we built her foot in the door offer. For her, it was a very specific operations type assessment where she could come into startup organizations, figure out what's going on with those organizations, into startup companies, I should say, figure out what's going on, what's working well, what's not working well from an external viewpoint, and also from a baseline perspective that she had established, like this is what good looks like, and they could compare it to what was happening with their organization. Some of it was metrics and KPI based. Some of it was more subjective. And then from all of that, be able to build them out a strategy map so that they could get an external quick point of view on how to up-level their operations, how to make their operations more scalable, and see where those blockers are by having her external perspective. And that's what she started selling as the foot in the door offer. And she figured out how, from there, once she built out that foot in the door offer, which was based on her knowledge, right? Based on her knowledge and expertise of what she normally sees her clients facing. Some of it is blind spots that they didn't realize they had. Some of it are things that they need, but they don't have time to do on their own. And some of it is that they don't have the internal expertise to make this happen. So she blended all of that together. And then from there, she figured out how to get on the calendar of her ideal client, which were those startup CEOs, how to reach out to them in a way that with some of them, she already had relationships, with others she didn't, to get on their calendar to start talking about what this could look like, where they're at right now, what's going on in their organization, and setting it up to offer this foot in the door offering for those where it made sense. And ultimately, it was around 50 days. She landed 2 of these foot in the door offers, and one of them turned into a long-term pillar client. So this is a very specific example for you of how this can look in real life. And it hinges on that mindset, on that foot in the door offer, on a quick win plan to get on the calendar of those ideal clients, and ultimately figuring out and iterating over and over again until you land that next client and get yourself out of the downturn and into an upswing and having momentum. So as we wrap up today's episode, I want to encourage you to put this into action, that you build your own 90-day plan, whether that is one where you need to use it right now because you're in a downturn, or one that you've got ready to go when and if you hit a downturn. Most of us do at some point or the other for whatever reason, right? It's not a problem to be in a downturn. It doesn't mean that you're not a good business owner. It doesn't mean that you have made a mistake that's so hard to overcome. This is how business works. There are ups and downs, and having a plan to address that is what you want to have in place. So go develop your 90-day plan. So you've this turnaround plan with the mindset, with the foot in the door offer, with the how will you find quick wins, the low-hanging fruit with potential clients who want that foot in the door offer or could want that foot in the door offer. And then know that you need to commit to the plan. Implement it. Don't change your mind after you've developed it. And when you start feeling self-doubt, or you notice yourself second guessing or justifying, that you redirect and say, you know what? We're not doing that today. I committed to making this work. How can I make this work? Not will this work? And not allowing yourself to talk yourself out of it, because that's where so many of us, the plan fails, is not because it was a bad plan, but because we didn't fully commit to it and see it through to the end. All right, my friend, that is your turnaround plan, and I will see you again next week. Take care.
Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melisaliberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.